really glad that you all could take time to participate for this virtual seminar. Together with us, me, Andreas, we are representing Inuit here in Sweden. And we'll do this together with our manufacturer, vendor, colleagues, friends, of course, all the way from India, from ManageEngine. So this is the first actually we do this year. Hopefully we can have some chance to do some more with you guys. That would be really nice. So please guys, make sure that you visit our sites to get any news. If anything shows up, please join us. This session will also be recorded. So of course you will get the link for the session afterwards, which you can share with your colleagues and some guys that you think can be benefited of these sessions. So very welcome to you all guys. This session will be divided in 4 different areas, or actually topics, you can say. The first one will be take care of Vivin. It's the role of automation and precision delegation in IAM. That's going to be really interesting to see what he comes with. The third one will be take care of my friend Harish. 3 components of IAM models and its importance. And the last one, or actually not the last one, will be taken care of Shada, revisiting hybrid authentication and password policies. These sessions will be around 20 minutes and will be take care of these fantastic product specialists for ManageEngine. And the last part will be kind of a panel discussion, question and answers. So if you guys have any questions, please, this is the time to ask them to these specialists, both for us in Inuit, and if there is, this is like mixed with Swedish and some Nordic attendees, but if you are from Sweden, I'm sorry, we're not really so good in Icelandic, but if you're from Swedish, please, you can write the questions in Swedish. We will just try to translate them as best as we can. So you will find a question box somewhere in the bottom of the screen. So make sure that you write them. If we don't have time for this session, we will of course get back to you by email or phone or something, because we will try to answer them as best as we can, as fast as we can. I will not take the time for all of these specialists. I think they can start by introducing themselves by session. So with that, I just hand over to Vivin and for him to present the role of automation.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Eric. So first things first, thank you very much for all the attendees here. It means a lot because your participation, spending some time with us, it's really, I mean, we are really overwhelmed by the response. First of all, thank you very much once again. All right, now, even before I move forward with the session, let me do something here. You know, since by now you would have realized that almost all of us are working from home, which means we'll have to rely on the bandwidth that we are given. Okay, so I don't want the bandwidth to be taking a hit just because the video feed is on. So we will be cutting the video feed now and we'll proceed with the sessions. So if you have any questions anytime during the session, please feel free to make use of the chat window and do shoot out your questions. We'd be more than happy to take them. All right. A quick audio video check. Are you able to see my screen and is my voice loud and clear? If that's a yes, I'll just cut the video feed and then proceed with the session. Right. So I'm just waiting for a couple of it. Oh, okay. Some of my colleagues have given me a green signal. Thank you very much, Eric and others. All right, so I'm going to cut the video feed. Let's start right with the session. Stay with us, okay? You have some interesting information coming your way. Right. All right, fantastic. So I hope nothing has changed. Everything is okay till now. As Eric mentioned, we have 4 sessions and 3 topics. Of course, the last session is for question and answers. The first topic is going to be about the role of delegation and automation in identity and access management. Okay. A quick introduction about myself. My name is Vivin Satyan. I have been working as a technology consultant in the Active Directory team of AD Solutions for 9 years now. I do two things as a technology consultant. I talk about technology and I also talk about products, products in the sense offerings from ManageEngine, right? Now, the agenda is going to be pretty simple. I'm not going to hold you any longer for more than 20 minutes for my session, okay? So I'll try and wrap it up in 20 minutes, crisp and short. So the agenda is pretty simple. And now that I'm going to be talking about identity and access management, I'm going to be focusing on two areas of identity and access management. Okay, one is delegation and the second one is automation. Okay, because initially identity and access management was all about authentication and authorization, but now it's not just about that. Okay, so point number one is we will be talking about Microsoft's delegation capabilities, both on-prem as well as in the cloud. And second is how we'll see how to implement a least privilege delegation model for identity and access management, right? Third point is what is the checklist for effectual identity creation and management? Let me give you an example. So every organization has this basic requirement of creating users, right? Be it in AD or Exchange or G Suite or Microsoft 365, there is this need of creating user accounts. Okay, so how do you create users or how do you manage users when there's a change in department or when someone leaves the organization? How are we going to effectively handle the user identities and their access levels in the network using automation? Okay, and the fourth point is when you automate any task for that matter, how do you exert supervision? In the sense, you don't want an automation to be disabling all the right users or all the active users, or you don't want an automation to make a mistake that is a bit hard for you to recover from. Okay, so how do you exert an automation for almost all the common identity and access management tasks by exerting supervision, right? So let's say you are the line manager or you are the team lead. So you decide what should happen or what should not happen when an automation is scheduled. Okay, so these are the four topics. I hope we will be able to do justice to your time. So please stay tuned. Now, delegation. Okay, now what exactly is delegation? So let's begin with the general definition of delegation. So delegation is all about a user having higher administrative capabilities grants specific rights to other users. It can be an individual user or it can be a group of users. Okay, that's basically delegation. And this has been the delegation model for almost 16, 17 years now, ever since the advent of Active Directory as a technology platform. Okay, now to take things one step above, I'm just going to be a bit technical here. Okay, now what we basically do or what happens when you actually delegate, let's say, a specific right to another user. Okay, what happens in the back end is there are just three things that we need to keep in mind. One is the user or the group of users that you're going to delegate a task to. That is parameter number one. Parameter number two is ACEs, are nothing but access control entries, and parameter number three is access control list. Okay, so let me give you an example. So in your organization, you have a user named Eric. Okay, and you want Eric to be able to create users or delete users or modify users of users belonging to a specific OU. Okay, so let's call that OU. Okay, let me show you an example here. Okay, so these are my organizational units. This is my Active Directory setup, and these are all my organizational units, as you can see here. So what I'm now trying to do is I'm now trying to give a user access to either all of these or just a specific OU, and then give them certain rights. Okay, so here this user is being given an access control entry in the access control list of the Australia OU. Okay, I hope I have made myself clear. So the Australia OU basically has an access control list. You just add an entry saying Eric can now create users in the Australia OU. Okay, so this is the base. This is the base principle of any delegation that we are going to be talking about. Okay, and another concept when it comes to delegation is inheritance. Okay. Now, what is inheritance here? Well, let me again take you back to my Active Directory. Inheritance basically means if I have Australia OU, and if I open up Australia OU, and if I have few other organizational OUs inside of Australia OU, should the permission just stop, should the permission of the user just stop with the top level OU, or should it drill down to all other objects inside it? That's basically inheritance, okay? So with this concept in mind, now let's dive right into the topic, okay? So again, a quick recap. A high privilege user is going to be delegating rights to other users or groups for any specific action. And basically it happens with 2 parameters or 3 parameters. One, a user or a group that needs access to do something. Let's say for creating users, deleting users, resetting password, unlocking account, or whatever it is. So what you do as an administrator is you give this user or the group or the ACE and add them to the right object. It could be an OU or even a couple of other OUs or the entire domain. Okay, and there's this concept called inheritance. It's basically like a parent-child relationship. So inheritance basically decides whether the permission is going to stop in the top level or it's going to drill down all the way to the bottom level. Okay. Now, when talking about identity and access management in the light of Active Directory, okay, in the case of Active Directory, there are 2 common methods of delegation. One is by using the delegation of control wizard, and the other one is by altering the group properties of the user. Okay, let me show you something here. So if I want, let's say the UK OU. Okay, so I want a user to be able to create users in the UK OU. Okay, so what I do is I use the delegate control option right here, and I hit next. I just add the right user. So let's try and add a user here. Okay, so the name of the user is Brandon Curry. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to give Brandon Curry, okay, the ability to do certain things. Let's say reset user passwords for all the users in this specific UK OU. Okay, so Brandon Curry will now be able to reset password for all these users that you see in the specific OU. This is one form of delegation. Okay, or the second form of delegation is, so if you have a user and you would wish to give them certain rights, it's simple, right? And we've been doing this for years now. So you just go to the member of tab, add the user to maybe the right groups. So if it's a password reset and account unlock group, okay. All right, you search for the right group. Okay, my bad. Check the names. All right, account operators or account creation. I hit OK. Okay. All right, apply. So these are the 2 common methods of delegation in your on-premise Active Directory setup. Okay. Now, the problem with such delegation methodologies is these delegation methodologies are highly intrusive. Okay, not only highly intrusive, they can also be abused. Okay, so just because we are pressed for time, I'm not diving into how to hack using an ACE or ACL. But if you're interested in knowing more about, or being prepared in protecting your ACEs and ACLs, just drop a message. I'd be more than happy to share some documents with you. Okay, now what you see right here, okay, are common Active Directory permissions that an attacker would be interested in. Okay, so again, I'm not diving into the details, but the deck will be shared and the recording of the session will be given to you as well. So these ACEs and ACLs can be can be used by an attacker and try and infiltrate your organization. Okay, for example, let me show you something here. Okay, so you have this special permission called right owner. Okay, now if I have this right owner permission, what I can do is I can probably change the owner of a specific object, okay, and take control of the object. Okay, so let's say, for example, the owner of the Australia OU is Eric. Okay, now I, as an attacker, can change the owner of this specific OU, okay, without Eric's knowledge, and then, take control of all the users in the organization, including their passwords and other group privileges. Okay, so it becomes really important for us to understand the level of privilege that we give to users. And the second problem that I see with delegation is highly intrusive and highly complicated if you do not know how to manage it. Okay, so I'm going to open up the properties of domain admins group here, and I'm going to show you something. Okay, so let's take a look at the permissions of domain admins. Now, if you take a look at the permission entry for domain admins, this is just the permission entry of one group. Okay, now just take a look at the permissions that this object has. I'm not even I'm not talking about the full control permissions here, just basic read and write operation. Okay, so if you drill down, okay, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you have at least 300 entries that you will have to be concerned about. Okay, so there are read operations, write operations, delete operations, and you do not know what is what. This becomes a bit complicated. Okay, and then comes this problem of inheritance. So when I enable inheritance, so what happens is the permission that I set on the parent object will drill down all the way to the child objects. It can be 2 child objects or 2,000 child objects. Okay, so this is going to be a bit tricky. So what is the other way around it? Well, that's when we talk about a non-intrusive delegation model. Okay, now so far we talked about on-premise Active Directory. The same principle holds for your Azure Active Directory as well. So if you have Azure Active Directory, we are not talking about ACLs and ACEs anymore. We are talking about roles. Okay, now there has to be a clear-cut definition of who is being given what privilege. Okay, and I understand that at least some of you listening to this session now are using a hybrid Active Directory infrastructure. Okay, are any of you listening to this session right now using a hybrid setup? I mean, you have both your on-prem as well as your Office 365 setup. I would love to see a couple of yeses if at all you're using Office 365, okay? Because you know the pain, okay? So the whole idea here is your delegation principle has to be non-intrusive, okay? You as an administrator can delegate tasks to any users in your infrastructure, but you'll have to make sure that there are no too many administrators. The administrative privileges have to be really precise, and it should be given to people who really need that privilege. Okay. Now, there are other things that we'll have to keep in mind when we talk about delegation. Okay. The points to be remembered when you delegate an action, be it in your on-prem Active Directory or in your Azure Active Directory, is the restrictions have to be really precise. Okay. You should be able to restrict an action, restrict users, or groups, OUs, or even attributes. So let's say you don't want your HR who's creating users to know what the user password is. You should be able to restrict your HR to that specific attribute. We are talking about precise restrictions here. Okay. And point number 2, use a domain admin account, or if it's Office 365, use a global admin account only for the actions that require that privilege. Don't use them for anything and everything. Okay, that's not a good practice. Point number 3, never use shared accounts. Okay, I understand that there are still organizations that use shared accounts that do not have a proper process in place. So never use shared accounts, because auditing becomes a strict problem here when you use shared accounts. There's no accountability. Number 4, when it comes to delegation, is there has to be an ability for you to review the actions done by other users. For example, you have delegated delete rights or disable rights to your technician. Okay. Now you should be able to find out when did he delete the user, or how many users did he delete, what time was the action performed, and all that. Okay. So these are the 4 points that we will have to keep in mind. And I'm going to show you how ManageEngine is going to help you in implementing a least privilege delegation model. Okay, so I'm going to be using one solution from ManageEngine to explain this concept. Of course, this solution is part of the Identity and Access Management suite. I'm going to show this to you real quick. Okay, but before that, let me show you something here. Okay, now watch the screen for a quick second. Now I have this user named HR. Okay, now we're trying to implement the least privileged delegation model using AD Manager Plus, which is an offering from ManageEngine. Okay, so I just want you to pay attention to this specific example or demo. So I want the HR to be able to create users in my Active Directory, in Exchange, in Office 365, all that. Okay. Having said that, I am not going to add this user to a special group, or I'm not going to give this user any explicit rights as we showed, as I showed before. Okay. Now, how can you make this user? Okay. The name of the user is HR. Okay. How can you make this user, or how can you give this user the ability to create users in AD, Office 365, Exchange, Skype for Business, or whatever it is, without actually giving them rights to log on to a server? Okay, that's the whole point here. Okay, I'm going to show you how this is done using AD Manager Plus, and then I'll explain the process. Again, a quick confirmation, this user is just part of domain users. Okay, and domain users do not have any rights to create other users in your infrastructure. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I've already implemented the least privilege delegation model in this specific domain, which is vCorp. So I'm going to quickly show this to you in action. Now, instead of giving this HR user access to my domain controllers or servers, what I do is I actually add them as technician to an application called AD Manager Plus. Now, the HR is going to log into AD Manager Plus. They are not going to log into the server. They are going to use their laptop and log into AD Manager Plus. Okay, all right. And now I told you that this is a domain-based authentication. So this is the Windows username and password of the HR user. Okay, so the HR logs in. Now this is where you will see the magic taking place. Okay, so now the HR is inside of AD Manager Plus. The HR sees nothing but one single option, which is create a single user. Now the HR is going to now create a user. So two employees are recruited. One is a technician and the other one is an administrator. So let's try and create an account. Okay, so I go to create single user as the HR. Okay, and the HR form has to be really simple. The HR should not know what the password is. The HR should not know where the Exchange server is or what the Office 365 license subscription is, nothing. Okay, so all the HR is going to do is the HR is going to type the name of the technician here. So let's say the first name is Inuit and the last name is Tech. Okay, so since this is a technician, the title of this user is going to be, well, let's say IT technician. Okay, I have all the titles that I can pick and choose from, but now this is an IT technician user. So what the HR does is the HR types the first name and the last name of the new employee, and the title is IT technician. And when I hit create, okay, it says successfully created the user, and the name of the user is Inuit Tech, and the user is created in the Australia OU. Okay, now let's go to the Australia OU, okay, in Active Directory, and check whether we have Inuit Tech here. Okay, I'm right now in the Australia OU. So when I refresh, I have Inuit Tech here. You see this? And when I open up the properties of this specific user account, you see that all the properties of this user are filled, okay, including the group membership of the user. Okay, and if you open up Exchange, you have an Exchange mailbox for this user. And if you open up Office 365, you have an Office 365 mailbox and license for the same user. Okay, but the HR still has access only to 3 fields. Okay, first name, last name, and title. And the HR does not have any other rights. So the HR still is a part of the domain users group. Okay. Now this is what I'm explaining, or I was explaining, as the least privileged delegation model, okay, of AD Manager Plus. Okay. And if you're wondering how this is done, inside of AD Manager Plus, okay, let me quickly show you how this is done. So it'll be easy for you to understand. Okay. Now I have logged in as the HR now, so I'm going to sign out and I'm going to log in as an administrator. Okay. Just 5 more minutes and I'll be wrapping up the session. So I just wanted to explain 2 concepts here, which I think is really, really crucial for any IAM process. The first one being delegation. Okay. Now, inside of AD Manager Plus, we practice the least privileged delegation model I told you earlier. So you might have noticed something here. When you go to the delegation tab, I've already added the HR user as a technician inside of AD Manager Plus. Okay. And I have given the HR user a role. So you see this, we have delegated roles right here. So we have a super admin role, a reset password role, create users role, and we have a role for the HR. Okay. So I'll quickly show you what's the role. Okay. So the name of the role is HR user creation and it's mapped to the HR. So when you actually open up the role, you will be able to see the list of actions that are delegated to the HR. So you see that the only checkbox that is selected is the create single user checkbox. Okay. And if you want the user, if you want the HR user to be able to do any other action, all you need to do is just go ahead and select the checkboxes here. Okay. As simple as that. If you want the HR to reset password, unlock accounts, just go ahead and select the checkboxes and we got it covered. And if you're wondering whether we'll be able to audit the actions of the HR, yes. So you have a dedicated audit report section here. Okay. When you go to the audit report section, it tells you that the HR created an account called Inuit Tech and you have the timestamp of the action. And if you want to know the details of the user, well, just hit on the details and you have the complete details of the user creation here. So this is what I was referring to as the least privileged delegation model. So how do we implement least privileged delegation in AD Manager Plus is we have task controllers, which is nothing but roles. So there can be any type of roles, super admin, OU admin for creating and modifying users, help desk technician just for resetting password, HR department just for creating users and all that. Okay. And you'll also be able to keep track of the changes, which I just showed you. Okay. So if you have, let's say, 5 technicians and 5 of them do different operations and you want to know who did what, not just in Active Directory, but also in Office 365, yes, we will be able to target all of these. Okay. All right. Just 2 more minutes and then I'm now entering into the second topic here. So far, we've discussed about delegation, and the second topic or the last topic for my session would be automation. Okay. Now, why should you automate? Okay. Now, when you do a task frequently, let's say you create users, you disable them when they leave the organization, and when they change the department, you'll have to change the access levels, permission levels. So these are certain things that are done frequently in an organization. Okay. So when something is done frequently, there arises the need for automation. Number 2, you'll have to reduce human errors. Okay. When you create users manually, there are chances for unnecessary privilege escalations. There are chances for you to type in a syntax incorrectly. Okay. Let's say the phone number, instead of being 3, 3, and 4, you might key it as 4, 3, and 3. Okay. So, and in order to, you'll have to maintain uniformity. Okay. When you create 2 users belonging to the same department, you should be able to give them same access levels, even while modifying them. Okay. Now, when you automate certain actions, you will be able to have better control of actions. Okay. Now, that's exactly what we achieve through AD Manager Plus. In AD Manager Plus, what we do is we help you automate some of the common tasks. One common task is creating users. So if you want 5 users to be created next Monday at 10 o'clock, tell the automation to read the user information from your SQL database, Oracle database, from your HR tool, and the automation will have the accounts created in any technology platform that you want, be it Exchange, Active Directory, Office 365, or Google Apps, okay? And the same applies for offboarding users as well, okay? So let's say you want to clean up your Office 365 or your Exchange or your AD, okay? Automate the process. Tell the automation to look for inactive users and scan your AD or Office 365, disable them, and then probably remove those users from the infrastructure, okay? Now, so far, I've been talking about automation, and I told you that the application can help you automate almost anything that you want, okay? I'm going to show you a quick example here. So if you go to automation and you go to create new automation, you have 4 categories of automation here: user, computer, group, and contact. And you can probably pick any tasks that you want, okay? You can even run a custom script automatically. So if you want a custom script, or if you want to remove Office 365 licenses for your inactive users or employees who have left the organization, you can automate any common task that you want, okay? But the problem is, when you think of automation, automation can work different in theory and in real life, okay? Now, what you're seeing on the screen is automation in theory, okay? Now, what you're seeing now is automation in reality. Okay? There are chances for errors. So what I'm trying to say is you can automate any tasks that you think you should automate, be it creating users, cleaning up, or removing permissions automatically from a folder after 10 minutes of usage and all that. But the problem is you will have to supervise and execute automation. And that is where we have mastered the art of controlled automation, okay? Now, for any automation that you create, you will be able to implement a business workflow, which is nothing but a request and approve methodology. So only when the manager or the team lead or the team manager or when the domain admin say yes to an action or yes to an automation, the action will take place or the action will not take place, okay? So you can automate, and at the same time, you can also supervise and then automate a process, okay? So apart from the automation part, the AD Manager Plus as an application, when it comes to identity and access management, can integrate with multiple technology platforms, okay? It can integrate with your business applications like Service Desk. So your Service Desk technicians can perform the operations right from the Service Desk console itself. They need not log into AD Manager Plus or another tool. If you're already having a SQL or Oracle database, the application can automatically talk to your databases, fetch the user information, and then help you manage your Office 365 AD or Exchange automatically, okay? So the application can help you delegate with least privilege, can help you automate tasks, and also integrate with a variety of business applications like Service Desk, UltiPro, ServiceNow, Zendesk, Zoho People. So when users are onboarded or when they leave the organization, the application can directly talk to AD Manager Plus, use the automation module, and get things done, okay? So with this said, I'm going to close the session here. And now we have a different aspect of identity and access management going to be handled by my good friend and colleague, Harish. So if you have any questions for me, please feel free to chat using the chat box. Thank you very much. And I'm now going to pass on the mic to Harish. Harish, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vivin, and good morning to everyone. And thank you so much for taking time. And before we actually get started, I just wanted to quickly check if you can see my screen and hear me okay. Just a couple of yeses on the chat window, and that should let me know that I'm not talking to my own computer. Yes, being given the green signal, so that's fantastic. So here we go. So the topic that I'm going to cover is three components of IAM model and its importance. And I am Harish Shekhar, and people usually know me by name Harry. And that's my email address, harry@manageengine.com. So be it a comment, thought, feedback, you want to share something that I'll be showing today, just an email away always, right? So let's quickly get into action because we have very limited time. And in this time, I wanted to make sure that there are a lot of action items. And taking things away from this talk, I want to ensure that your organization is safe and sound, both in terms of IAM perspective and in terms of cybersecurity perspective as well, right? The agenda, but I'm going to go above and beyond what I have listed here. I'm going to point you to some resources. So you've got some takeaways, you can share it with your team and how you could do best with the resources that we put together. And where am I getting these resources from is I've been with ManageEngine for about 8 years now, and I get to travel the globe. I get to meet administrators, IT security professionals, and they give me their problems. And of course, I try answering them, but if not, I come down, sit with my team, we do the R&D, and we put out these collaterals. And then I'm going to jump into trends shaping IAM in 2020 and three components, core components of IAM model and its importance and how you could be well ahead of the curve in terms of addressing identity access management through ManageEngine, right? So new resource, I'm not sure how many of you have seen this. And as Vivian promised, the decks will be reaching out to you soon. So please consume it once we share it with you all, with your team members. And this is one of my team's latest collateral. And what we have done here is how could you strengthen your cybersecurity by analyzing what could go wrong. So these are all things that we all know, but we've overlooked. Small vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, or the attack vector. Connecting the dots is what we have done here. So this is just not only Active Directory, this is Azure, this is AWS, this is databases, or any other part of your network where things could go wrong and attacker could come into your organization. So what we have done is we have given you video simulation, we've given you blogs, we've given you a mix of both for people of different variety who love seeing, who love reading, who love a bit of both. This is for you. And what could you learn from this is these are simulations of attacks using different techniques, and IAM is also a part of that attack. And these are attacks which threat actors use, and you could understand what could go wrong and how you could protect your environment using ManageEngine solutions. But if you're using any other solutions, the key concept is the problems are real. You start from Australia to Canada, the landscape or the geography might differ, but everything around IT security or around Microsoft ecosystem are all the same. So give this a read. And since we are focused on the identity access management, we do have many collaterals, but I wanted you all to take a look at one of the free collateral that we put together is more than one way to gain admin privilege. And it's just a 27 slide where we have given you tips and tricks around Active Directory, around your AD objects, around your NTFS, around your subnets and protocols. And there are other free resources as well, like PowerShell, why you need to understand that PowerShell can be weaponized. So all of this is available. The reason why I'm showing you this is in case you need them available, reach out to Eric or me or Vivian, and we will give you all of these resources, right? So three components of IAM. I'm going to start off with authentication, accountability, and authorization. So that is the three pillars of my triangle, core three pillars, three components rather. And where does this lead to? It leads to user convenience and security. They are overlapped, but ensure that when we talk about user convenience, security takes a hit. And when you talk about security, user convenience takes a hit. So this is where I'm going to start off is the anatomy of an IAM solution. So when a user is onboarded, he or she gets identified. And when they walk into the organization, they authenticate themselves. And once they authenticate themselves, they can access resources based on the authorization, based on the permissions, based on the privileges. one gets when he or she is onboarded. And then according to the resources that they touch based on their privilege, they stand for accountability. So this is where your identity access management solution or practice should fall into picture. It has to cover the authentication, the authorization, and accountability. So let's dive deep. I'm going to point you to some use cases as well. So what are things, how did we shape this? How are identity access management shaping in 2020? What was it in the past, like a year ago? Zero trust security, only the minimum access for users. Compatibility, how well does it fit into your infrastructure? Multi-factor authentication, more than 81% of breaches were due to weak passwords. Third-party vendor management, right level of access for third-party subcontractors. Ease of use, produce a user-friendly GUI and user-friendly possibility or scenarios where people understand things easily. Example, password resets and unlock. Security incident response, where you go ahead in case if there is an authentication problem, weak protocols coming in, how should you be going about dealing with it? So this is all a part of the trending shape of IAM in 2020, right? And three fundamental questions that I'm going to ask, and I hope you all have answers for these three questions. So let's get started. How is the initial access granted? Onboarding. Vivin spoke about delegation. Vivin spoke about permissions management. But the first things that I want you to have a clear strategy or a picture in place is onboarding. Why should you bother about onboarding? Is granting of the initial access and ungranting the access efficiently is the core function of identity access management solution. Example, you've got Active Directory, you've got Azure Active Directory, you've got SaaS applications like Office 365, you've got custom applications, on-premise Exchange, Link Skype for Business. The need for user onboarding and the application that he or she can touch is just, the numbers are just added, they just keep getting added on and on and on. So on an average, it takes about 30 minutes to create one user across all of these platforms. So this is exactly why, with clear strategy based on roles, based on departments, based on OUs, a user, when he or she gets into the specific component, must have all of the privileges that the administrator wants. And this should be your first checkbox tick that needs to be checked in when you're focusing on identity access, because this is the core functionality of identity access management. This is just not only onboarding, this is also offboarding. Vivin did give you the automation technique, but there are easier ways that AD Manager can do this. When I talk about AD Manager, that's a module of AD 360, which can quickly automate user onboarding with precision, put them in the right OU, check for duplicates. If there is a duplicate, it will auto assign fields, mandatory fields, random password. Passwords are email, so no one gets to know a password of another user anymore. Put them in the right OU, give them the right group membership, scripts, login scripts, profile paths, Exchange on-premise, Office 365 with licensing. Everything should be taken care at just one click. But at the same time, security must not be overlooked. And this is where a solution or a strategy-based solution comes in real handy, right? So what we have done is we give you many ways through AD 360, which is our identity access management solution. And what we do is you can create one user at a time, multiple users at a time, you can automate them. But what we thought is we should give some hierarchy or people-based intervention for onboarding and offboarding. So what could you do is requester could raise a request, the reviewer could check the request if it's worthy or who's raising this request, what's happening, and then the approver looks into the request. In case if there's something missing, he can push it back or he could add information, and then the executor goes ahead and confirms all of this. And these are just speed breakers to ensure that things go smooth. And at the same time, there's no security lapse or something being undercooked or overcooked in terms of user onboarding. And this is a streamlined approach through workflow within AD Manager Plus, which is a module of AD 360. Second core component is onboarding, offboarding, yes. The second core component is how are roles assigned to individuals? How is access modified, added, or removed, right? An important function of IAM is to manage access throughout the life cycle. It's just not only onboarding and offboarding constitutes about 60%, but modification is also equally important. So that does have a good weightage. So we just can't take off what people do in between when they walk in and they walk out. So the access change is extremely important. And there is one of the administrators that I met did tell me that they find it extremely difficult to modify roles or grant additional privileges because they tend to overdo it. They tend to give them extra privilege and they forget to remove it. So this is where what we thought is, why don't we address it using examples like access modification using native tools? So if you suspect some of your users have inherited access due to nested folders, how quickly can you determine the inherited access? So this is life between onboarding and offboarding. So you get privilege, permission management, roles management, and all of this needs to be a part, because a user who is a part of sales could move into a technical role. A person in technical commercial role could move up the ladder and become into the C-level people. So this is where permissions and privileges have to be understood. And what we have done is the native, like Vivian showed, is confusing, has been around for a long time, but it's extremely difficult on the eye because you cannot get one report off the shelf. You need to run PowerShell scripts. And what we have done is, in order to cut all of these problems, we wanted to give you in-depth visibility and error-free bulk permission management. This is for your files and folders. And to cut off the first level visibility from your native, what we have done is we will tell you who's got what access to what level on the domain. So that's your first 101 report. And after that, you could go ahead, find out which folders he or she has access to, what is the privilege he or she has, privileged resources that he or she can touch, and you can quickly manage them from AD 360 itself. So this becomes your solution to better manage your on-premise infrastructure, which is Active Directory, and your Azure Active Directory, Office 365, all at the same time. And now what we have done is, you all would have heard about just in time and just enough access. So what we have done with AD Manager, the module in AD 360, is how could we give time-bound permissions? Example, a group asks for access to a particular folder, and the administrator gets a request, and the group could, let me give you an example in this case for better understanding. A group could be the financial auditors who walk in periodically into your organization. The folder could be a financial folder, and they would be requesting about 2 hours access to that folder. An administrator senses this as a threat, and he or she has its own validation, and says, all right, I will only give you for 1 hour. And after that 1 hour, access is automatically revoked. Or the administrator, knowing this is a regular process, could give them 2-hour access, and it is automatically revoked post the time operation. So this is where we have done this for your files and folder access, and you can even automate or add people to a specific group for a certain amount of time and revoke it after a few hours of time. So these customizations or these possibilities are what makes your identity access management strategy a whole lot secure, time bound, and at the same time, if people want more access, things are getting documented, right? And the third most important thing, which is my last bit, is how are users identified in a network? So this portion, I will let Sharda do the honors, but the first point is where I'm going to address it. Still, people use username and passwords to claim that they are the identity. And of course, Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, Office 365. You all know how difficult it is to deal with password policies. So to kickstart this conversation, I am going to point you all to a free resource, which is right here, Weak Password User Finder Report. And what this does is, in case if any of your users are using weak passwords, this tool will tell you which user is using it. Please note, we will only tell you the hash, and we will not tell you what password they use, because you're going to bump in a text file with weak passwords, and the hashes will be compared, and we will surface the user who could possibly be using one of the weak passwords that you have bumped in using the text file. So this is the first step. But more about passwords, Sharda will be doing the honors, but I have a quick question to poke first. And now that we're talking about how are users identified in a network, what are you guys doing for analyzing weak protocols like NTLM, like NTLM v2, Kerberos ticket generation, or OAuth, or be it for Azure Active Directory? How are weak protocols eliminated, or how are you monitoring who is doing what, when, where? Because that is also a part of identity access management, when you have to understand who is doing what with the associated privilege. So this is where I am going to give you some best practices for on-premise AD and for your Azure Active Directory as well, right? So for your on-premise AD, please follow best practices for Active Directory. Limit administrative rights on workstations and restrict access to PowerShell, restrict access to critical resources, eliminate weak protocols such as NTLM or any other protocols which Microsoft themselves say this is not valid anymore. You need to beef up your security, and you have to understand vulnerabilities and misconfiguration. And on the other side, when you deal with Azure AD, please restrict the admin portal access to non-administrative users, but watch over that the login can also be done using PowerShell. Deploy Azure MFA to all end users, restrict access to Azure portal through conditional access, protect your Azure AD Connect server, and eliminate security threats by following Microsoft Secure Score. But so much of recommendation, and of course, privileged identity management. And for people who are using Azure, you know, most of my recommendation mentioned here comes with premium license. It does not come with free or Office 365 enterprise license. It comes with P1, P2. So this is where maintaining identity access and IT security is so simple, right on paper. But how could you manage and monitor them? This is where I wanted to walk you through 8360, which is our identity access and IT governance solution. And what this solution does is it helps you 360 user onboarding, offboarding management, reporting on on-premise Active Directory, Azure, Office 365, AWS, and a lot more. And then you've got AD Audit Plus, which is a change monitoring tool, which tells you about your weak authentication protocol. Example for Azure Active Directory, who logged in from where, which applications were used, login failures, brute force, password spray attack for your on-prem and Azure AD, time and date, which city did he or she log in from. Everything is documented. Why am I showing you this module of 8360? Is because you have to monitor who logged in, how many logon failures, and how did he or she log in, what protocol did he or she use, and this tells you in case if there are things going about. It has user behavior analytics, which reads user behavior real time and tells you anomalies instantaneously, and your dashboard will be buzzing with alerts. You get email, you get SMS, and all of this can be given into your SIM solution, and it can even talk to your help desk ticketing tool. And this is where we are taking an IT security into a SOAR perspective. So this is pretty much all I had to show you all today. I know 20 minutes is not the best time of all, because we are pressed for time and we wanted to value your time as well. So if anything that I showed you today, be it the links, be it the talk that I gave, the examples that I quoted, just drop an email to me. It's harry@manageengine.com. I'll be looking forward to your email, and I will be staying around to address some questions in the last as well. So I will be passing the baton to Sharda now, and thank you so much for staying around. Sharda, over to you.
Thank you so much for 2 power-packed sessions, Harry and Vivian. It kept me hooked to the screen, and I'm going to call these bullet sessions because 20 short, brief minutes and a lot of informative, information, lot of informative things that we learned, new things that we learned that kept us hooked to the screen. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time to be part of today's seminar. I'm going to do a very quick audio and video check just to make sure that the transition is seamless. So if you can hear me loud and clear, and if you have no trouble viewing the screen, please drop in a yes message in the chat box. Waiting in for a couple of confirmations before I proceed further with today's session. If my voice is loud and clear, and if there are no issues in viewing the screen, please drop in a yes message. Perfect, thank you. Thank you for the confirmation. All right, I'm not going to keep you for longer than 15 minutes. And I have 2 important concepts that I would like to talk about. Or what we are going to do collectively today is revisit hybrid authentication. We're also going to revisit password policies. Hi, I'm Sharada Murthy. I work with the marketing team of ManageEngine. I'm a product expert in AD Self-Service Plus. And one of the favorite things that I like to do is talk about passwords, which is what I'm going to do today as well. I am going to spend the next 15 minutes walking you through why you need to revisit the security posture of your organization to safeguard identities. A password-based outlook or a security outlook on password management, all right? I have this very interesting report that you see on the screen. I love numbers, I love talking about numbers, I love reading reports, I love surveys, and this is a very, very interesting report, very, very specific to Sweden, all right? We have about 20 to 40% cyber attacks that are password-based. And the increase in cyber attacks between 2019 to 2020, I have data only till 2020 May, but yet the increase in cybersecurity attacks in 2020 in Sweden specifically, based on the Swedish cyber threat landscape, I will pass on the details to you once we wrap up the session as well, is a whooping 63% increase in cybersecurity attacks, all right? And nearly 20 to 40% of these attacks are password-related password-related attacks. And these attacks can definitely be prevented by taking the, by making the smallest changes in your organization on an organizational level. And today I'm going to talk about 2 concepts that you and I are well aware of, 2 concepts that we are familiar with and yet have not managed to enable on an organizational level, all right? So let's try and have an easy and effective authentication, enable an easy and effective authentication for the hybrid IAM. I'm also going to walk you through the idea behind enforcing a better password policy, because when I speak about cybersecurity attacks, the next thing that comes to my mind is to have the right security posture in place, to have the right defenses in place. And one of the basic and bare minimum that you need to do is to have a better password policy in place, which is one topic that I'm definitely going to talk about today. And secondly, I am going to address the importance of enabling conditional just-in-time access, not just to applications, but to your systems, your login, your data, all that and much more. That said, if you do have any questions, please keep them coming in the Q&A tab. We have the panelists with us today. You can also drop in your questions in your native language. We also have the team from Sweden checking in with us today to help us answer all your questions. So please feel free to drop in your questions, if any. That said, we also have Vivian and Harry taking up time to answer questions. We also have a dedicated Q&A. So looking forward to all your questions on authentication, on hybrid IAM best practices. I'm going to quickly move on to walk you through the comparison between the native password policy and the password policy that you need to have in place to have an efficient IAM, to have a better to have better defenses in your organization. All right, let's start with the native Active Directory password policy. It definitely lacks quite a lot. I'm going to quickly jump to the setup that I have right here and show you or try to change password for an end user in my organization. I have a test setup up and running. Let me key in the password. What would typically happen is I have no idea what the complexity rule is, what are the complexity rules that I need to meet. But what's going to happen in this particular case is even when I key in a password that is not good enough, all right, though it seems to check multiple boxes, this password will clearly be rejected because it has a common word and it has a dictionary word as well. And the idea behind walking you through having a better password policy in place or starting with passwords is that passwords are the first layer of defense. And most organizations still rely only on passwords for authentication. So in order to have a good authentication in place, in order to have reliable authorization with your native Active Directory, it's important for you to have a better password policy in place. And that is something that I definitely wanted to touch upon today. Before I move further, just out of curiosity, how many of you who've joined us today work in a hybrid environment? And how many of you who've joined us today have moved completely to the cloud? And if so, please let me know by dropping in your messages in the chat box provided. But I'm going to quickly move on to give you a comparison between the AD Self-Service Plus password policy that you can enable in comparison to the Azure AD password protection, or in other words, Azure AD password policy that you can enable for users in your organization for your cloud infrastructure, all right? Does it provide visibility to ban passwords? No, it doesn't. This is still good enough in terms of comparison with the native Active Directory, the on-premises Active Directory, and yet you will not be able to selectively enforce granular password policy for users based on OUs or groups present in your Azure infrastructure, which once again is something that we need to revisit. And jumping back to the console that I have here, this is a very quick test that I like to do whenever I'm talking about passwords, which is, it is nothing but the Kaspersky weak password finder. All right, I'm going to wait for the page to quickly load. And what this tool basically does is when you key in the password, when you key in a password that you believe is strong enough, it gives you a time frame of how long it's going to take for that particular password to be hacked, for that particular password to be susceptible to compromise. And it is a real reality check that's taking quite a lot of time. So I'm going to quickly jump to AD Self-Service Plus. Since we are pressed for time, I'm going to give you a solution instead of discussing the problem. So jumping to AD Self-Service Plus right here, moving on to the configuration tab, I have a custom granular password policy that disallows users in your organization from setting weak predictable patterns like QRT, days of a week, months of a calendar, organization name, username, characters from the username, characters from the old password as well. And you can do this granularly for all the users in your group, for all the users in your AD based on OUs and groups present in your Active Directory. More importantly, this custom granular password policy can also be enforced for multiple on-premises and cloud-based applications. I'm going to list the applications for which you will be able to enable a custom granular password policy. And right from Office 365, G Suite, Salesforce, you will be able to have a custom granular password policy enforced for user groups based on your organization, departments, compliance mandates, user privileges as well, and also selectively give access to these users, selectively give access to these user accounts, to these applications, and in terms of having a better password in place as well. All right, moving on to tackle another aspect of better authentication. Once again, I'm talking about two topics that you are extremely familiar with. One is having a reliable authorization in place. And in order to do so, you need to have a better password policy, because that is your native Active Directory acts as an authentication source. Your password is your authentication source. It is also the means to strong authorization to give you access to multiple applications and data well within the organization as well. But that said, the other aspect that I wanted to talk about is to not rely on just one factor of authentication. And that is why I'm going to walk you through two-factor authentication and different checkpoints in which you can enable two-factor authentication. All right. Naturally, your first factor of authentication when you're working on a hybrid environment has to be your native Active Directory, your native Windows Active Directory password. But that said, your secondary authentication, your secondary factor of authentication could be anything from biometrics, passcodes, app-based passcodes. It could also be smart card authentication, preferably anything that works best for users in your organization. What I've done here is I have enabled VPN authentication. I wanted to walk you through authentication for users in your organization. So I have enabled VPN authentication in the backend. Once again, I want to quickly reiterate the fact that this entire session is being recorded. It's being recorded live, and you will find all the materials from all these sessions reach your inbox in the next couple of days. But that said, I do know that it can be an overflow of information in a short period of time. So please stick with us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop in your messages. All right, so since I have my VPN authentication enabled, let me verify my identity with the first factor of authentication. I'm working with the test user account, Adam. I have connected this to an on-cloud setup that I have, an AWS setup that I have, simply because I wanted to give you different options that's available. After successful user identity verification with the first factor of authentication, what typically happens is I would have a seamless connection to my network. What's going to happen in this case is that I am going to fetch the code that's popped on my Google Authenticator on my mobile device, and it is a time-based passcode, all right? And once again, this will act as a secondary factor of authentication for this particular user, for the user Adam belonging to this particular policy. And only on successful user identity verification do I have access to my network. Do I have access as an end user to my network on successful, reliable user identity verification. All right, let me walk you through what happens for endpoints. I'm going to take a remote desktop connection. I have endpoint authentication enabled as well. So as an end user, when I try to log in and access my Windows machine remotely, once again, what typically happens is I would have a one-click seamless access to my machine. But what's going to happen in this case is I need to verify user identity with what you see on the screen. With the authenticator options that's available, I need to verify user identity. I also have an option to trust this machine. But what if I am not the right person to get access and I'm trying to bypass this particular method of authentication? I have a clear indicator that restricts me from logging in and accessing my Windows machine. This is the same case for Windows, Mac, and Linux systems. If I am not able to successfully verify my identity as an end user, when I try to log into my endpoints, when I try to log in and access my VPN, I will be denied access. All right, and this is typically what we are trying to achieve. We want to not rely on just one factor of authentication and enable a minimum of two factors of authentication at different endpoints. All right. Moving on to talk a bit more about access, moving on to talk a bit more about what more you can do in order to ensure that the right person has right access to the right machine at the right time. I want to introduce the concept of conditional access. What do I mean by conditional access? Once again, I'm going to quickly walk you through the pre-configured setup right here. What I've done is I have created a conditional access rule where I have defined my business hours. I have defined the devices or the platforms from which users in my organization can log in from. I can also choose to restrict access based on IP addresses, IP address range as well. I can also restrict access based on the location that I check in from. You can choose to restrict access based on location or provide access based on location based on simple criteria. You can use the and, or, and not criteria, the formula to set the conditional access rule right here. and associate this with the self-service policies that you've built. Once again, conditional access concept is great. And it's more beneficial, especially when you have users checking in from different parts of the country, different parts of the world as well, working remotely, and having to take access to data, to machines, to applications as well. You can determine what level of access you would like to provide for users in your organization. With conditional access, you define the network, you define the devices, you define the working hours, as well as the geolocation, which could be identifiable risk factors, all right? And on satisfying these conditions, you can choose to, the application basically chooses to provide access, either complete access or limited access, or increases multi-factor authentication, or increases assurance, or in the worst possible case, blocks access to features. And when I say features, I'm talking about access to password self-service, access to your endpoints, and also access to applications for which single sign-on has been enabled. And that is why conditional access is critical for every single user in your organization. You can selectively have different policies based on user groups, based on OUs in your organization, associate different conditions as well, and ensure only the right person has right access to the right machine and at the right time. That said, once again, coming back to the topic of authentication, you as an administrator have an option to enable different levels of authentication and different authenticators for different user groups as well. I'm going to quickly jump to the setup that I have up and running. For the policy admin, for administrators in the test setup that I'm working with, I have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 authenticators that I've enabled. All right, I can also choose to set the level of authentication. For the password self-service process, I have about 2 authenticators enabled. I've set a particular authenticator as mandatory. I've also enabled authenticators for the AD self-service plus end user logon for endpoints as well, and different levels of authentication for different checkpoints, at different checkpoints. And that is something you can definitely customize, once again, based on user groups, once again, based on how things work best in your organization. That said, I'm going to quickly walk you through a password self-service process as well. So let me try to perform a live password reset. I, as an end user, have the advantage of being able to reset my password at any point of time, provided I am able to successfully verify my identity. If you remember, I had enabled the Microsoft Authenticator as mandatory for this particular user. So I'm going to quickly key in the CAPTCHA right now. Also enter the Microsoft app code, Microsoft code on my app, and click on continue. I have been able to successfully verify my identity. I can now pick another method of authentication, because if you remember, we had enabled 2 factors of authentication for password self-service. I click on continue. I once again verify my identity with the security question answer method of authentication. You can work with SAML authentication. You can work with any time-based one-time passcode. You can work with Duo security, RSA security, pretty much anything that works for users in your organization. But more importantly, I, as an end user, remotely at any point of time with the right user identity verification, will be able to perform a password reset at any point of time, and with a granular password policy enforced across all my password change and reset password console. And when I try to bypass this, I have a clear indicator letting me know that my password has poor patterns, restricted patterns. It has characters from the username. My password does not pass the password entropy rule, because having a good password in place is not just about checking multiple boxes. Password at 123 is definitely a password that checks multiple boxes, all right? It has an uppercase, it meets the limit, it has a numeral, it has a special character as well, and yet will be rejected time and again. It's password at 123, all right? Will be rejected time and again because of the simple fact that it does not pass the password entropy rule. And password entropy is basically the susceptibility of a particular password from being compromised. So it's important to revisit our password policy. It's important to ensure that we have a good password policy in place and we have the right security measures in place. And with that, I am going to quickly wrap up the session for the day and open the audience for questions. We are open to questions. We are going to spend the next couple of minutes answering all your questions. If you do have any, please let me know. You can also reach out to me personally at sharad@manageengine.com. That said, now is time for the interactive question and answer session. I'm also going to request our partner team from Sweden to check in.
We are checking in.
Hello, happy to have you back.
Great sessions. I'm going to see if we have any questions come in.
All right.
So we have one about user experience. So if I am an organization and I'm running an IAM solution, will that somehow impact my users in some way, either positively or negatively? Will they even know that we are actively working on this in the background? And will they have any distinct benefits of it as an end user? Which is a good question.
Okay, let me take that. Thanks, Andreas, for the question. And yes, when you set out looking for an identity access solution, there are a few things that you need to focus. First thing that users question you is on the self-service options. Are there any self-service options of me doing the password resets, how simple it is? And there's always a balance that people want on security and user convenience. That's exactly my kick-off point of my slide deck, where I told end users want things easy, because you can't blame them. They keep running around, and when you keep increasing security, they're going to keep giving you more emails to understand how to do it. So this is where, when you are after an identity access solution, the first thing that you need to focus on is a self-service option, which keeps things extremely simple, but at the same time does not compromise on security. That's one. Two is an amazing strategy on onboarding and offboarding, because when people come in, they don't expect much, but when they leave, the organization expects the administrators to wipe out all of it immediately, instantaneously, so that there's no any possibility of attacks in the background. So that's two. And three is ensuring that if all of this is scalable, if it will sit into the organization for future needs. So this is where the user experience is extremely important, because you have to keep the solution very simple, but at the same time solve many problems.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's also, I think users don't necessarily want too much permissions or too many credentials to juggle, because that just leaves them vulnerable as well. So to empower them into actually helping out resolving those problems is really, really potent.
Yes.
Let's see if we have anything else. Well, it's also the fact of IAM and security and how they interact with each other, and how big of the very broad spectrum of IT security is IAM. That's also a good topic. And how do you feel your sessions play that?
I will give chance to everybody, so I'll just fill in my portion on this. They're not separate. They work hand in hand. The identity access and IT security are like, they hold hands together, but hardly people recognize that. They think it's a different scope of work altogether. But just imagine if you give a user just a domain admin access, which I hope no one does, just on a trial project. Look at what he or she could do. So this is where they could blow up your entire environment and things could go crazy. According to me, both, they work very closely, and one has to pay attention that identity access and IT security are both equally important. I will let Vivin and Sharada to add in as well.
Oops,
right,
sorry,
I
I was on mute. So sorry, guys.
Okay.
I was talking to myself for some time. So now the whole idea here is it's all about initially identity and access management. The whole idea of identity and access management was just authentication and authorization, but it's not the case anymore. So you have authentication, you have authorization, all that's there, but it has branched down to, self-service, and then you have a portion of it being privilege identities management. You'll have to think about implementing self-service in a very secured manner. So you cannot separate the IT security aspect from identity and access management. So any IAM solution has to have the IT security touch, and any IT security solution should facilitate the process of identity and access management. So that's how I see it. So they work hand in hand, as Harish rightly mentioned. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think that those are good points. And one thing that I've noticed a lot is when you work with these solutions in a lot of organizations, one thing that they provide is just awareness and transparency into the directories. And it can sometimes be surprising when you come to an organization and you set up AD Manager, and as soon as it loads up and the dashboards get populated, most people are quite shocked because your average IT technician is not fully aware of just how many accounts do we have and what is the state of those accounts, like what's actually going on under the hood of our directories. And I think today with hybrid directories, you have an Azure AD, they're synchronizing to the on-prem, you're using them more and more for integrations, more and more of the authentication is centralized in some ways, and then we're branching out, we're tying in more applications, we're using security groups more, we're using the Active Directory to store business data about our users or organization, and just to give some sort of pane of glass where people can go in and see everything collected is something that I don't think a lot of people have seen before, because they're so used to just working in the native kind of users and computers screen. And that helps a lot with the security aspect, because it actually gives you a clear view of what do we actually have in our directories.
True, very true. You said it rightly, because there's no point in collecting terabytes worth of data and storing it somewhere without getting any insights from it. If the data that you have collected is not actionable, the whole process fails. So it's not about how much you have, it's how you use it. Or when it's something that you're going to roll out on a large scale, how convenient your users feel in using it. At the same time, how secure is that process? So it all boils down to striking the right balance. And one of Harish's point is where striking the right balance between user convenience and security. So that's the whole idea. All right, let's see, we have a few more questions. Okay, so I see that we have a licensing question related to AD Manager Plus, and people wanted to know whether it's AD Manager Plus is any different from an IAM offering or anything of that sort. So the question really is AD Manager Plus an IAM offering from ManageEngine? All right, now let me make it very clear. Okay, so what happens here is AD Manager Plus is just one module among or one module of a broader suite called AD 360. So answering the question, is AD Manager Plus an IAM offering? Well, AD Manager Plus is a module of the IAM offering called AD 360. So if at all you're interested in getting your hands on the offering from ManageEngine, AD 360, and inside of AD 360, you can then pick and choose the modules that you wish to play with. You want the AD Manager module or the self-service module and the password info Sharda was talking about, or you want these based on your usage, in the sense it's licensed based on the number of domains and the technicians, just to give you a license perspective. So I hope I have answered that part or clarified that part. Is AD Manager Plus an IAM offering? AD Manager Plus is just a module of the larger suite. All right. So any other questions?
I would like to mention as well that if you go to the ManageEngine.com website, there are demos, public demos, that you can actually try out a lot of these solutions. And once again, I think it can definitely be worth downloading and just trialing these things, because it does teach you a lot about your environment and your directories. Because a lot of Active Directories today are not installed by the people actually running them today. I think if you're working in an IT department today, you're not the one that actually set up and installed Active Directory. That was done the guys who used to work there or the guys before that. So there's a lot of legacy floating around, and to actually dig into that, it can be really difficult. So on the website, there are demos, there are trials you can download and set up and get that first view and try it out.
All right.
We have one question about the future, about how this will map into the kind of future role of directories. I think it's more about the hybrid aspect of the AD solutions. Are they fitting into the new brand of kind of directories, so Azure AD and coming solutions that are coming to the IT market? I think there is quite a bit of integration with the Azure AD part in AD Audit and the other solutions.
Absolutely. So I'll take that question. So answering to the directories that we integrate right now, we are focusing on various things. So we already support the on-prem version, and then you have the Azure version. And apart from the Azure version, we are focusing on other technology platforms for file auditing as well. So NetApp, EMC, and all that, and also for data DLP, so for DLP reasons. So talking about things from an identity and access management perspective, we integrate not just with various technology platforms like your Exchange, Azure, Office 365 or Microsoft 365, your Exchange, Sky for Business, of course, there's an EOL, but yeah, Sky for Business, and your on-prem. At the same time, when talking about other integrations, not just about technology platforms, when you talk about business application integrations, we work hand in hand with some of the top IT service management tools and also help desk offerings. So we make sure that the access management process is not starting off with a basic help desk tool. So let's say you have, any organization, any IT infrastructure nowadays has one thing in common, and that one thing is they have a basic ticketing tool or a service management tool. Okay, so that service management tool is the initial, initial trigger for all your identity and access management needs. So when an employee joins the organization, or when there's a change in department or role, or when the employee leaves the organization, so it's very important for the IAM solution as such to extend its communication capabilities, not just to technology platforms, but also to other business platforms as well, or business application platforms. So our solution, AD360, is heading into that direction, and we've already covered or we've already incorporated quite a bit of technology platform adoption and also business application integrations as well. So I hope I've answered your question.
Okay, let's see if there's any other questions coming in.
No, I think that was pretty much all the questions we got. Guys, if you have any more, feel free to send us an email. Also, the Inuit, of course, ManageEngine. You can always reach out to these guys at any time. Thank you guys so much for the presentations. And for you guys that are on board, thank you for taking the time off. I know you're a busy day to stay with us, to listen to this. Very, very nice. Please look out in the future for other virtual seminars. These times, normally we try to do some face-to-face seminars too, but We have different times now, so that's the way it is. We do our best to do everything online. And thank you guys for managing, Vivian, Shada, Harry for presentations, Andreas from us. Be safe out there and take care.
All right. Thank you very much. You take care as well. It was nice talking, and see you next time.
Yes.
Cheers, Eric.
Bye,
Thank you
guys.
so
Cheers,
much.
Andreas.
Thank you, team.
Take care,
Yes.
guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.